House managers are to continue to press their case against former U.S. President Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial. The Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Alicia Bárcena, has warned that the coronavirus pandemic will set back women's participation in the labor force by a decade. In Greece, authorities implemented a new lockdown till the end of February to curb the spread of COVID-19. Hello, welcome to From the South. I am Janet Perez Moya from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In the United States, House managers on Thursday will continue to press their case against former President Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial in the Senate. The hearing is expected to be focused in the consequence of the violent January 6 riot on the Capitol. Impeachment managers aim to show that Trump tried to fabricate an election when, through relentless and escalating campaigns, they stress that the former president ignored adverse court rulings, pressure and threatened electoral officials, attacked senators and members of Congress, pressured the Justice Department, and even bullied his own vice president. Trump's lawyers are scheduled to begin their presentation on Friday. While the event unfolds on Capitol Hill, President Biden is seeking to focus on his priorities with an Oval Office meeting on investing the nation's infrastructure and a visit to the National Institutes of Health. The National Electoral Council of Ecuador continues the audit of the vote count following the general elections held on February 7. With 90% of the ballots audited, Andrés Arauz is consolidated as the winner in the first round of the presidential election, with more than 32% of the vote. Meanwhile, neck-to-neck in second place are Yacu Pérez of the Pachakutik Indigenous Party and Guillermo Lasso of the Create and Opportunities Party, both of whom have made allegations of electoral fraud. Pérez has so far secured 1962% of votes, while Lasso is just ahead of him with 1963% after having trailed behind until now. The population is still waiting for the Electoral Council to make the full results official in order to find out which of the two candidates will face Andrés Arauz in the second round. Bolivia inaugurated the second phase of its largest solar power plant this Wednesday, financed mainly by France as part of the commitments made as the 2015 Climate Summit. A first phase of the plant in western Bolivia was inaugurated in September 2019. The project required investment of about $100 million, of which 70% was provided by the French Development Agency. Another 10% was financed by Europe's Latin American Investing Facility, and the remaining 20% by Bolivia's central bank. The facility aims to produce clean energy to eliminate the use of fossil fuels to supply the country's power grid. Bolivia primarily generates electricity from hydroelectric plants. Civil society organizations in Haiti marched on Wednesday to demand President Juvenal Moïse step down from office. The mobilization was organized by the National Union of Workers of Haiti, as well as the student movement and other organizations. The march was widely supported by the population and had as its main objective to reach the metropolitan area of the city of Port-au-Prince to denounce government corruption, authoritarianism, and persecution by Moïse administration. Hundreds of women took to the streets of the Argentinian city of Rojas on Wednesday to protest the murder of an 18-year-old woman by her partner in a country that continues to battle high rates of femicide. Ursula Bajillo, aged just 19, was established to death by her former partner and policeman Matias Ezequiel Martinez, against whom she had previously filed 18 complaints for gender violence. Since 2015, Argentina has been the epicenter of massive street demonstrations under the slogan "Not One Less," which placed the issue of gender-based violence on the public agenda.
What I need is for him to live, so that he can pay his sentence with life and not with death, because it would be much easier for him to die as my daughter died, but he would not pay this in jail. And what we want as parents is, as minimum, life imprisonment for him. And I know that God's going to listen to us and the professionals we have too. The person who killed my daughter had a psychological, not a psychiatric certificate. The person who signed it was a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. He was not medical.
President of Argentina, Alberto Fernández, is meeting this Wednesday with the Agricultural Liaison Board to discuss the sector production and the measures announced by the executive for rural areas. The meeting held at the Presidential Palace will see Fernández and its aides evaluate together with the Liaison Board the strategies to simulate food production in the country and reduce its cost. During the meeting, representatives of the agricultural sector will express their concerns about the President's decision to increase taxes on export of primacy products. Fernández has explained that the measure is due to the increase in the domestic demand for products such as red meat. This Wednesday, residents of the Colombian city of Buenaventura made a human chain to demand an end to the violence in the country. Citizens gathered on Bolivar Avenue, where they held hands to form a human chain stretching 21 kilometers and advocate for peace in the region and throughout the country. The demonstration was supported by the Catholic Church, which was represented by Bishop Rubén Darío Jaramillo. Activists also demand better living conditions and the strengthening of the public health and education systems. We will go now to a short break. Follow us on Twitter at teleSUR English and Pérez Moya teleSUR. We will be right back.
Who's moving the chess man? What interests and motivate the actors behind each event? What's at stake? Critical Moves investigates every event from Monday to Friday, only on teleSUR.
Welcome back. The Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, Alicia Bárcena, has warned that the coronavirus pandemic, which set a black female labor force participation in Latin America by a decade.
These patriarchal cultural patterns are expressed in the persistence and worsening of violence, gender violence, feminicides that are increasing and that we've called the pandemic in the shadows, because it is a pandemic that is happening in the shadows and in silence, but that is affecting women and girls.
According to the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, one of the labor sources most affected by COVID-19 was paid domestic work. The level of employment in this area during the second quarter of 2020 fell by 24% in Brazil, 46% in Chile, 44% in Colombia, and 45% in Costa Rica.
If the measures that governments are taking do not reach women, we will have 118 million women in poverty, 23 million more than in 2019. And what does this mean? It means a 10-year setback, 10 years of setback, and this is really a lost decade in women's participation in the labour market. Women are on the front line of the response to the pandemic, accounting for 73.2% of the total number of people employed in the health sector, as we also saw in the education sector, above 70%.
The Brazilian Senate on Wednesday approved a bill that prohibits the deactivation of field hospitals for patients with COVID-19 until vaccination has progressed in the municipalities where they are installed. The next, which will now go to the chambers of deputies, established that field hospitals may only be dismantled by regional or municipal governments when more than 70% of their inhabitants are immunized against the novel coronavirus, or when sufficient beds are available in their normal health networks. Last year, field hospitals played an important role in treating less severe cases of COVID-19, helping to relieve pressures on the public health systems of many of the country's regional capitals and worst-hit areas such as São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and Belo Horizonte. Mexican regulators gave emergency approval to the Chinese-made COVID-19 vaccines, CanSino, Biologic, and CoronaVac.
CoronaVac vaccine from Chinese company Sinovac has already received authorization for emergency use. This vaccine will arrive packaged in Mexico. All production is in China and will arrive packaged in Mexico. The CanSino vaccine will arrive in bulk. In fact, tomorrow we have the first bulk that will arrive in Mexico and will be transferred to a plant in Querétaro where it will be packed.
Director of the Pan American Health Organization, Carissa Etienne, has noted that the agency is confident of the efficacy of vaccines available to address the COVID-19 pandemic and that there is evidence that they are also effective against the new variants of the virus.
Based on the evidence that we have now on the variants of concern, we are confident that our growing portfolio of COVID-19 vaccines remains useful and will guide us through the end of this pandemic. We have at our hands a whole generation of effective vaccines to prevent infection and especially severe disease. Down the line, we may need to adapt our strategies, but we will continue to rely on these vaccines. The challenge now remains to ensure that these vaccines are distributed quickly and fairly across our region, starting with those who need them most.
A new lockdown in the Greater Athens region that closed all schools and most shops began Thursday and will last until the end of February to help contain the spread of COVID-19. Greece Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis announced the new lockdown on Tuesday and said the decision was dictated by an increase in hospitalizations in the area, which is home to about 4.5 million people. The measures are also to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 variants first detected in England and South Africa. Health officials said hospital intensive care units for COVID-19 patients in the Greater Athens area are about 71% full. To date, Greece registered more than 167,000 infections and over 6,000 deaths. The World Health Organization on Thursday said deaths in Africa from COVID-19 were projected to pass the marker of 100,000 in the coming week.
In the first year of this pandemic in Africa, more than 3.7 million cases have been reported. And in the coming week, the continent is projected to pass a devastating marker of 100,000 lives sadly lost to this virus. The African continent accounts for only 3.5% of global cases and 4% of global deaths. African countries have risen to the challenge of COVID-19, but at huge cost to national economies, to the livelihoods of families, and to the development of the continent. Now, the second wave, which appears to have peaked in January, has been far more lethal than the first. Deaths from COVID-19 have increased by 40% in the last 28 days compared to the previous 28 days. The increasing deaths from COVID-19 are a tragic warning that health workers and health systems in many countries are dangerously overstretched.
The director said African countries that have not found cases of the coronavirus variant dominant in South Africa should go ahead and use the AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine.
Our recommendation for the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine is very clear. I mean that if you have evidence that the variant is the 501 V2 variant is dominant, the keyword here is predominant in the country, then we recommend that it should not be deployed there for the obvious reasons that we have, as we indicated, it will have reduced activities in neutralizing antibodies as such. But for countries that have not identified this variant, there's absolutely no reason why it should not be used there. I think, again, remember that the threshold for any vaccine to be used is 50%. So I think we should encourage countries actually to use that vaccine where they do not have evidence of that variant.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en el.
Dot in the I. Saturday, only on teleSUR.
Welcome back. Tokyo's citizens held a vigil in support of Myanmar's ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi on Thursday. They could be seen holding lights and chanting in protest at the country's military takeover. According to Japanese government data, around 33,000 people from Myanmar live in Japan, and both countries have strong economic ties. The demonstration comes as a growing number of governments worldwide are curbing diplomatic ties with Myanmar and increasing economic pressure on its military. U.S. President Joe Biden ordered new sanctions on Myanmar on Wednesday following the military takeover and ousting of its civilian government.
As you know, the assault on Burma's transition to democracy remains an issue of deep bipartisan concern. We've consulted at length, for example, with Senator McConnell, who has had a very keen interest in this, and his team, and we welcome their helpful insights. We've also been in close contact with our allies and partners around the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, driving vigorous diplomatic outreach to help coordinate an international response to what happened. As protests grow, violence against those asserting their democratic rights is unacceptable, and we're going to keep calling it out. The people of Burma are making their voices heard, and the world is watching. We'll be ready to impose additional measures, and we'll continue to work with our international partners to urge other nations to join us in these efforts.
U.S. President Joe Biden announced the formation of a special Defense Department task force on China this Wednesday and ordered a review of the military's strategic approach to what he termed the challenge from Beijing.
Today, I was briefed on a new DoD-wide China task force that Secretary Austin is standing up to look at our strategy and operational concepts, technology and force posture, and so much more. The task force will work quickly, drawing on civilian and military experts across the department to provide within the next few months recommendations to Senator Austin on key priorities and decision points so that we can chart a strong path forward on China-related matters.
About that, China's President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden over the phone on Thursday, making in-depth exchange on view on bilateral ties and major international regional issues. Biden extended greetings to the Chinese people and wished them happiness and good fortune in the new year. Xi once again congratulated Biden on his inauguration as U.S. president and wished the Chinese and U.S. people a happy and auspicious year of the ox. Xi pointed out that the restoration and the development in the China-U.S. relations is the most important event in international relations over the past half-century and more. The Chinese president stressed that China and the United States will gain for both sides from cooperation but lose from confrontation, and cooperation is the only right choice for the two sides. The conflict between wildlife and humans is growing in Kenya's Amboseli National Park, despite the precautions taken by placing electrified fence to prevent wildlife from entering areas that are increasingly being used for commercial agriculture. Oscar Epelde brings us more details.
Of the adult generation here, few were able to study. Like this child, they tended to their herds.
And Joseph, do you want to go to school?
What is his ambition? Simply to get wealthy.
They decided to divide land into divisions so that everybody to part his part of land. We want everybody to benefit.
The nearly 5,000 members of the group ranch felt let down by their 3 representatives. The crops produced in Namelock can now be expanded on private farms, although they claim they have also demarcated protected areas to benefit from a new common management program by tourism and conservation organizations and their donors, who rent fragile land, paying for the passage of animals, and building these electrified fences to protect communities from wildlife and vice versa.
We have people with cows, we have people without cows, and they sell that land because of poverty. They send children to school. They want also to pay the land, because once we said we divide the land, you have to pay as a member.
We are pastoralism, so when there's no rain here, we need to move. When the land should be divided, maybe people will sell cows because everybody say you don't come to my small land. I don't want to see the cows here. In future life coming, there's no migration of cows. People sell cows. You can remain with 2 cows only for milking.
In Kimana, many plots are leased to produce tomatoes or onions. Curious about the smell, elephants visit them at night.
He destroyed this area.
The scouts of the Big Life Foundation try to prevent conflict. Kamba tenants have paid several hundred thousands to the Maasai Tajiri, or ranch owners. Ngay lights a fire to scare off the elephant as he expands his crop.
I want to expand. That's why I'm burning grass to increase the onion. Even if the elephant comes and destroys it, I have to work the land again.
The scouts are local Maasai and support the communities by guarding the wildlife corridor, which, at this entrance to the Kimana sanctuary, is only 200 meters wide. They keep the elephants away from the fence to reduce conflict. They also rent out plots of land with international donations. There is no poaching, no one kills elephants here, but the habitat in which they have lived with the herders is narrowing.
We are looking after our fence to be good, so that can look after the animals to pass the corridor.
The elephant that has just been expelled from the area later smashed the fence.
He cheated us and then came back to us and then to enter the chambers.
The electric shock is supposed to have deterred it from going through the fence.
The ecosystem management plan designates it for wildlife and livestock use only. But actually we're seeing a lot of agricultural development taking place within it. So, unless it's managed correctly, we'll see Amboseli being strangled. Amboseli requires wildlife to move in and out. It's part of the ecosystem. The ecosystem today is a lot smaller than it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago. It was probably once about 3 million acres. Today, what you could truly say the ecosystem where animals have passage and can move is maybe 1.5 million.
An ecosystem management plan and its proper implementation, the other condition for preservation.
Desde Amboseli, Oscar Repelde para teleSUR.
We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For telesur English, I am Janet Perez Moya. Thank you for watching.
Who's moving the chess man? What interests and motivate the actors behind each event? What's at stake? Critical Move investigates every event from Monday to Friday, only on teleSUR. Innovation, science, the technological breakthrough and its influence in society.
Viajeros del saber, el futuro está aquí.
Atomy. Monday, only on teleSUR.
Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective. With a team of journalists in 25 locations around the world to convey our people's reality. From the South. Weekday. Only on teleSUR.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes teleSUR.
Saturdays, only on teleSUR.
Rendimos tributo a las culturas, a los creadores y los cultores. Arte, diversidad, tradiciones, costumbres. Eso somos. De lunes a viernes, solo por teleSUR. Nuestras acciones tienen repercusiones.